to improve our professional practices and also to enhance our students' learning experiences. And that's, one of the reasons why we have opted for this program. And we are glad, that, we are given this opportunity to learn with you. So on that note, I would like to welcome my colleagues as well who have taken the time to join us today. Some of us have, some of them have different, commitment as well, but because of their desire to improve on their professional practices, that's why they have joined us today. So we really thank everybody for joining us. And on that note, I would like to leave the floor to Dr. Charlie to kickstart the workshop. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're so thrilled to be here with you and to see all of you with us this afternoon. Um, Sean and I know we have a big task to fill to attempt to do anything as good as Jermaine Pipkin did last week. And so he's pretty amazing. So we're going to do our best to follow up with that same type of aspect. I'll give you a little bit of introduction on myself, and then Sean can do the same. I've been executive director here at NACADA since 2007 and have been at the executive office since 2002. Prior to that, I was an English faculty member at a college in Georgia, and then ultimately was very active in the revamping of our advising program. We had a combination of faculty advisors as well as professional advisors working together side by side and really looking at how does academic advising promote the excellence of our students at that institution. And I think that's one of the things as we talk about today will be, as we talk about some of these issues, is how do you look at it from your institution, your students, and your what you're working with every single day. Um, it's very, it's not often that an institution can take something from one school and apply it to their school because every school is different. So today, as we work with this, we're going to really talk about what it is that you need to know, and then give you some opportunities to think about that and discuss them among yourselves and come back and talk about those pieces. So we're very excited to be here. This is a great opportunity for us to continue to make our global efforts across the world. And this is a great chance to do that. So Sean, I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit.
Thank you, Charlie. Hello, everyone. My name is Sean Bridgen. I work with NACADA Executive Office as the Associate Director for External and Institutional Partnerships. So this type of thing that we're doing today is exactly part of my job, and it's very excited to be here and doing this full time. I've been a member of NACADA since, about 2002. And I remember first meeting Charlie whenever he came to my university to give a presentation about advising, and that's when I knew I was in the right field after hearing Charlie talk about what advising is really about. Prior to my position here at NACADA, I worked at the University of Pittsburgh, where I had the opportunity to start a brand new advising center from the ground up in the School of Computing and Information, which was a newly formed school. And before that, I worked at Penn State University at a small campus that's out near Pittsburgh, which is where I'm from, the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. And I worked there for about 11 years and took them from more of a kind of an old school advising scenario and brought them up to kind of the current standards of practice, and got to work with lots and lots of faculty. My main position, a major part of my job was helping faculty to become better at academic advising and helping to promote excellence on that campus. We're really excited to share with you some of these foundations that I have used in the past, and basically that Charlie has taught me, and things that are represented in our literature. And if you go to the NACADA website, you can find lots of books and publications and a lot of free resources that you can dig into and start to really examine these foundations more deeply that we're going to discuss today.
Thank you, Sean. So we're going to get started. What Sean and I are going to talk about today is promoting excellence in academic advising. And I think one of the things that's really important here to think about is advising is not just registration. Advising is not just scheduling students for another semester. It's not just helping students figure out particularly what the graduation requirements are or those types of pieces. It really is looking at how to build that relationship with students, how to build that relationship with students to the university, how to build that relationship with students to their major, to each other, but most importantly, how to get them to really understand the relationship they need to have with their own academic program in order to be successful. So what Sean and I are going to talk about today are what are some of the principles, what are some of the basic foundations for advising that you can use as you look at your advising as an individual, but we also want you to think about it in terms of what you can do to assist your institution to enhance your advising program and to look at how to pull those pieces together. So the first thing I think we really have to think about is advising is one of those few enterprises in higher education that can reach all students. As we think about advising, it's the one piece that every single student has an opportunity to connect with. A student can come to a campus, they might go through an orientation, they might not. They might go to a career center, they might not. They might get involved with some type of program or some type of activity on campus, or they might not. They might take advantage of special learning with faculty or with tutors or with those types, or they might not. But advising is that one piece, that one aspect of the campus that we can ensure all students have an opportunity to be involved with. That's very, very important, because what that says for each of you in your advising situation is that you are that connection that a student feels to the institution. You're that connection that a student feels to their academic program, to their career, to whatever they're there to do. And in that piece, you become integral in whether the student is going to be successful or not, because that's the one place students know they can always come back to. And I think that's something that a lot of our administrators don't understand. But sometimes I'm not even sure that advisors always understand that piece of you are that key, you're that connection. But because of that, that means that what you do is so important, and understanding those foundations that you need to have in order to be the best advisor, have the best advising programs is so important as you go through that. Sean? So I think one of the things we need to think about is what is it that advisors know? What is it in your, I'm a firm believer, and Sean can attest to this, but I'm a really firm believer in advising is not something we do as a job. It's something that we do as a piece of our soul. It's something we do because we truly believe in students. So what we know is we know how much our connection means, but we also know how much that student's connection to us means. We know that our role at the institution is essential for our students to be successful. We know as advisors that what we provide students is that piece of connection, that piece of relationship that they don't always get in other places on the campus. And finally, we know that what we do makes a difference. Every one of you here today could probably get a job anywhere in your country and maybe make a little more money, possibly. But more importantly, you would probably not have that commitment. You would not have that feeling of making a difference in someone's life. That's what advising is about, is making that difference. So that's what we know as we go into this. Sean?
Yes, thank you, Charlie. There's a few other things that you want to think about too, to build on what Charlie is saying, is that because advisors are that one point of connection for all the students, advisors get to, not only do the students see the advisors, the connection, but because advisors are meeting with all these students, getting to talk with all these students in a one-on-one situation, they can start to see what kind of hot spots might be coming up in terms of concerns that students might be having. They might know things like, the student is thinking about transferring to a different institution. They might know where they are having trouble negotiating their time or their experience at the university. So you want to think about that as well. What can advisors bring to the table? So if you're an administrator, what can you be talking to your advisors about to see what is kind of going on within the student population. And so one thing we like to start with NACADA is the why. So part of promoting excellence in advising is really finding the why for your campus. Why do you want to improve advising? What is your motivation? And a really good way of starting that is to really reflect on your values as an institution, and the values you want to bring to academic advising. Because as you'll see, that the values that an institution have is something that needs to drive the rest of what is happening in the advising programs. And as Charlie said, what is good for one institution is not always necessarily good for another institution. And a lot of that is because of what an institution values, what an institution's mission is, how an institution is built, how the staffing is. There's so many pieces that can kind of contribute to the way a particular institution can promote excellence. That it really makes the most sense to start with the values. And so when you have those values, you can start to think about how do we want to apply those through our advising program. So what we want to do, and we're going to try to make this a little bit interactive, as interactive as possible, is just kind of take 5 minutes and just silently to yourself on your computer or on a notepad or whatever you have, and just write down why advising is important on your campus. And I'm going to mute here so you can have some time to reflect.
And we are going to come back and ask you to share some of those with us.
Okay, I see lots of great ideas coming in through here in the chat. Um, and the one thing I'm really excited is Abu has in here that advising is an integral part of teaching and learning. And the primary reason is to facilitate students learning in the right direction, help them understand the structure of the programs. This sounds exactly like the kinds of things that we work with all the time in the CAUTA. What do you think, Charlie?
Absolutely. And I think that connection to teaching and learning, um, I like the words of that many of you put, like effectively, successfully, to really say that it's not just something we do to help students take the right courses, but it's really seeing what the future is going to be and how those relate to that. Amir talks about the helping them to achieve their academic and career goals. As advisors, how do we help the students recognize that and connect their academic work with their career work and see the connection there? I think is so very, very important. Um, I love that word successful again. I really think that I think Hussein talked about the idea of advising is one of the many things we do on a campus, which means that we have to work collaboratively with all of campus, meaning admissions and orientation and career, and with faculty, because our role is to build those connections. So many times, um, advising is kind of that hub that everything else what comes out of. We're the place that many times those collaborations are built, because in so many ways, advising really has kind of a foot in academic affairs, a foot in student affairs, and how do we bring those together? So that collaboration is so very, very important. Um, exactly right. Helping to address those red flags in a student's aspect, because we know what those may be. Students don't always recognize those red flags, and helping them to understand those pieces of that integrative socialization. So very important. Students come to college or to the university many times, and they don't see it as any different than any other educational experience they've had. And one of the things advising does is really make it clear that it's a social event. It's really bringing students together to learn from each other as well as to learn from the faculty member. And those pieces are so important. Sean, I'll hush and let you talk a little.
No, I think that was excellent. That was excellent summary of what's coming through in the chats. Does anybody like to share anything vocally with the group? Any discussion points you'd like to raise?
I'd say that, aside from the, technicalities and the fact that students, have a very hard time finding answers for their common questions regarding registration, the curriculum, the prerequisites, and all of that. The main driver for me personally to do academic advising is to bond with students. A student usually doesn't only need an answer, but also needs assurance, trust, guidance, and sometimes inspiration, right? And they find that in their lectures. So academic advising is basically what paves that road of communication between the faculty and the students. So if we reflect this on the campus as a whole, I mean, we can say that a university that has a strong, robust academic advising program will probably tend to have a very good academic and non-academic environment due to the fact that, academic advising has created a solid common ground for important values like trust and communication and so on.
Mohammed, a really excellent point. And one of the things that we'll talk about in a few minutes are the competencies for academic advising. And you really hit on that advisors need to know the knowledge. Students come to us for the questions about registration or course selection or those types of things. But that's just one piece of what we need to know. We also need to know how to help build that bond that you talked about and how to build that relationship. So as we think about what the competencies are that advisors need to have, we really do think about those in terms of what advisors need to know, do, and value. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes, but you really hit it really on the head, Ahmad, is that there's several different competencies or skills we need. One of those has to be, we got to know the program. We got to know the institution. We got to know what registration is about. We got to know all of those pieces, because that may be the first thing a student asks us about. And if they feel like we don't give them the answer that helps them, they're not going to come back and build that bond. So it's that first answer to a question that gets them to come back, because they know you know the facts. They know you know the information that's going to help them be successful. A student will only bond with us if they trust us. And that information you talked about is so much that trust that's there within those. Um, Dr. Salam, I love your statement about important for the marginalized students. I think you're exactly right. Whether they be students with disabilities, whatever their issue may be, those students that feel marginalized for whatever the issue is, advising is key to helping them connect to that campus. I love to provide a roadmap to students. You're exactly right. Students come in, they see a list of courses. They don't know what those courses mean. They don't know how those work together. And you're helping them build that roadmap within those. Who else would like to tell us a little bit about what you say advising is?
I can share my experiences. So I was shared as a student when I was in graduate school in Texas. So I went to University of Texas in Arlington, and because of the advisor did not communicate well with me, I did not know what's ahead of me. I had to leave that. I could not continue with that. So I moved to University of North Texas instead. And at the same university, University of North Texas, I had a classmate. It's not a classmate; it's a friend of mine who was doing his PhD. He had so much difficulties understanding his path because of the advisor wasn't very active. So from that, I understand that advisor is a key, an essential key to success for any students, especially if it's new for you, you don't know what you're doing, and so many things that you need to learn about research, about so many things that you need to be active. And if the advisor is laid back and not communicating with you well, I think it will be very difficult for you to continue and successfully finish your plan.
And Hussein, I think you're exactly right. That's one of the things we need to think about, is that just because a student is successful with their undergraduate degree, when they move into graduate school, they still need that quality advising. And so as we think about advising for the undergraduate student, how are we preparing them to move into that graduate program? And what do we want them to know as they move into that? You know, some of the things that we want to do is teach students what advising is, so they begin to recognize, Ruzan, exactly what you said, which is, if I don't have that bond, then I'm not really going to be able to make this be successful. Many students think it's their problem because that doesn't always exist. And what we need to do is help them to understand that this is what quality advising is. This is what you need to be looking for. And this is what we need to talk to those advisors about. And then, unfortunately, you had to change institutions. That's not a good thing, especially in the state of Texas, because it's so big, you could have gone to any institution there. But it's unfortunate you had to change institution to get quality advising. And I think that's one thing that our students come to us wanting. They don't know how to tell us that. They don't really know what to ask us for. They know they want something, whatever that something is, but they don't know what that is. We're there to help them understand that. And so I hate you had a bad experience, Huzan, but I bet it's made you a better advisor, because you now know what you want to do with students. I say all the time that many people go into advising because they had excellent advising, or they had horrible advising, and they want students to do they want a better opportunity for them. And so you've come into this knowing what you didn't get and know what you now want to provide your students. And that's a wonderful way to look at this. Thank you so much for sharing that. Who else would like to share with us?
Yes, I have something to share, please.
Yes, sir.
Please.
Thank you. I think there is a huge difference between advising a student from day one on his or her program, or advising a student at the fourth year or the third year of the program. What do you think? Is it healthy to change the advisor every couple years or in the middle of the program? So maybe he can get another knowledge from different advisors, or it's better to keep the same advisor for the whole program to monitor the students from day one until he or she graduate? What do you think?
What an excellent question. And I'm going to talk a minute, then I'll let Sean talk as well. I think you brought up 2 points that are superb. One is that a student needs a different type of advising in their first year than they need in their second year, than they need in their third year, than they need in their fourth year. So you really hit a good point there, is that if you approach advising as every student needs the same thing from year 1 to year 4, you're missing a whole set of what students need to learn. And so one of the first things you want to do as an institution is think about, what is it we want first year students to know? What is it we want second year students to know? What is it we want third year students to know? Fourth year students, developing those learning outcomes, which we're going to talk about a little later in the session, and then designing those to make those skills. Then the question, Babar, comes very dearly into, now, does everyone need to know all of those? Do we want to train someone to be the advisors for the first 2 years, knowing these are the learning outcomes they're going to have, and then train folks to be the advisors for the third and fourth year? I've seen campuses do both within that. But it comes back to, as an institution, what have y'all decided on your learning outcomes for year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and then deciding as an institution, do we want to have a group of advisors who are significantly trained to do the first 2 years, and then a group of advisors who are significantly trained to do this the third and fourth year? And so you've made an excellent point. Thank you for bringing that up. But it really does come down to, what do you as an institution see as those outcomes for each year? And then how do you want to deliver those? So one person could do all 4 years, or you could literally divide it so that you've got people who do just the first 2 years and people who do this the third and fourth year. But as an institution, you want to make that decision. I think one of the biggest keys in that is, if you have a group of advisors who do year 1 and 2, and then a group of advisors who do 3 and 4, we want to be sure they collaborate well, so that if a student leaves your office and then goes to Mohammed's office, that student knows exactly who they're going to see. They know that the 2 of you have worked together to make them be successful within that. I don't know if that answers your question or not,
Yeah,
but it really does tie into what you want the institution to look like.
what do you think if there is a main advisor who will monitor the 4 years program or the whole program, and co-advisors who will monitor year by year? For example, every year can be another advisor, but there is a main advisor who will monitor the students from day 1 until he graduates. What do you think?
I'm gonna let Sean talk a minute, then I'll probably come back to it. But let Sean start here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to kind of, that's an excellent question. Thank you for that. And I think, as Charlie mentioned, it could go either way, whatever you think is going to work best at your institution. I've worked, so I can tell you a little bit about my experience at the University of Pittsburgh. When I started there were 2 different departments. There was the Department of Computer Science, which was housed in the School of Arts and Sciences for it. I think it's one of the oldest computer science departments in the United States, over 100 years old. And then in the other school, it was called the School of Information Science, and that is actually where the whole field of information science started. I came out of library science with the Carnegie Libraries in Pittsburgh. So they both of these departments had all this deep history academically. And whenever they created the new school, they brought together computer science and information science, all the undergrad and graduate programs. So all these PhD students with very similar kind of interests. How can computing be used to solve problems? And but anybody who's a computer scientist or information scientist in the office knows, or in this room here, knows that that's a huge question. And so what we did is we brought the undergraduate programs together under one roof, and we wanted to have 4 advisors who worked with students for their entire 4 years. And these are folks like me who do not have a background in technology. I mean, I used to be a systems analyst for a little bit, but that doesn't mean I'm a computer scientist or an information scientist. That's a very different different knowledge set than I have. And so what we did is we worked very, very closely with the faculty, and they taught us what we wanted. How do you want us to talk to students about what information science is about, what computer science is about. How do you make decisions about whether you want to be an info sci major or a computer science major? What are the common knowledge areas that you want students to have after their first year, their second year, their third year, so that we could integrate in our advising programs the things that the faculty would want them to hear. Well, what we also did is we created this sort of what we called a faculty mentoring piece, so that the faculty who had particular research interest areas, or maybe we had a lot of students interested in artificial intelligence. And now what do I know about artificial intelligence? All I know is that they need to understand Bayes' theorem, and I can't explain Bayes' theorem right now to you. I have to look it up again. But these are folks who live in that world. And so we would have, so if a student, for example, came to me and said they were really interested in artificial intelligence, or they're really interested in visualization, or they're really interested in machine learning, I could then have, at my disposal, a group of faculty who have signed up and said, boy, I really want to talk to students about these things to help them understand how this kind of fits in with the rest of their curriculum academically. So we could then refer students out to those faculty. And so it was really like this hybrid approach of what you're talking about. So that's one example of how you can get to what you're talking about. Is in what I think we're going to get to today is you can help to figure out what is best at your institution. And it's so, advising is so contextual. It's so based on the systems in which it operates, that it really has to come from the people in the system and also the students. So if you're thinking about redesigning your advising, I think the recommendation we usually give is to get a broad group of people, get faculty, get administrators, get students to really talk about these things in depth and figure out what is going to be the best thing for our institution. And it takes time to build out these types of, to answer these types of questions that you posed. Anything else you want to add, Charlie?
I would just say that probably about one of the things I would think about is that you might not have one model that you're talking about that would focus at the whole institution. So, for example, what you might do in the college or the department or the school of engineering might look different than what might occur in the college or the school or the department of business. And so one of the things we would think about is, how do these students have different skills or needs than the students in another major or career within that? And so I think you could do exactly what you're talking about university-wide, or you might look at it differently from department for department. And so I think as you as an institution take these ideas and begin to implement them, this is when you need to begin having those conversations. Does it need to be what we call a centralized model, so that every institution, every student gets the very same advising experience, no matter what major or career or degree they're in? Or is it more of a decentralized model, so that College of Engineering might have this type of model, the College of Business might have a different model, but the real piece is, are you all attempting to reach the same goal of learning? So that regardless if a student is in business or engineering or computer science or whatever the degree is, at the end of those 4 years where they all have learned the same thing you want them to learn, and then how do you do that within those areas? Did that answer your question a little bit more without going around in a circle and not responding at all?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I agree. It might be different model. It might be mixed model. And yes, I agree. Yes, thank you.
Which means y'all need, as an institution, to have those conversations about what do you want every student to achieve, and then how may each college work with that within those pieces.
Absolutely. And actually, your question is a very, very good segue to our next piece, which is these foundations that you can use to help answer these kinds of questions within your institution. So I'm going to share my screen again to go back to the PowerPoint here. And so NACADA has developed over the decades what we call the pillars of academic advising. And these are sort of the foundational pieces that you can use to build upon to answer exactly the questions that you have been raising in this group. And this is really awesome, because what I've learned so far by working with you, we have a group of very dedicated educators who really value advising and really want to know how can we sort of optimize our advising programs, our advising systems in order to serve the students the way they need to be served, and to help and as Charlie mentioned, focusing on the outcomes is a really important piece of that. So I'm going to go through each of these pillars very briefly, just to give you kind of a little bit of a background on them. And I want you to know that if you go to nakata.ksu.edu, I'll put it here in the chat, you can read about these in depth. Nakata.ksu.edu is the website. And so the first one we're going to talk about here is back to the values. So Nakata developed, what year was it, Charlie, that this was refurbished? Sorry, you're muted.
2015.
2015. So there were some core values, and Charlie brought together a group of professionals, the top minds in advising all over really the world, to kind of get together and find out what are the values that advisors bring into the space. And they came up with this list: caring, because you must care about the student. If we don't care about the student, we're kind of in the wrong, I think, probably in the wrong line of work. Commitment. It's commitment to the student, commitment to your institution, commitment to the values of the institution. Empowering. So we really believe in empowering the students so the students can make their decisions. So when the students leave our institutions, they can go into the world and feel that they're ready to conquer the life that they would like to have for themselves. Inclusivity, as somebody mentioned before, we must be inclusive of all students, especially thinking about marginalized students. So when we build our policies, when we build our procedures, when we build out our technology, are we sure that all the students at our institutions are going to be able to access these things in the same way? Are our policies benefiting one student but hurting another group of students? So this gets deep into policy analysis and data analysis. So if we really value these things, we have to look deeply into the policies, procedures, and even the data to see how is our institution affecting folks throughout the entire institution. Integrity, and as I was raised, integrity is what do you do when nobody's looking? Integrity is really about having integrity and following up on commitments, following up with your institutional goals, telling the truth. Whenever I used to train advisors, I would always tell them, if you don't know an answer to a question and you don't even know how to find it, just tell the student that's fine. Because whenever you tell them, what, I'm not sure, but I will get back to you, and then you actually get back to them with the correct information, that's a really great way of building that trust. Because without, as Charlie mentioned, without trust, it's hard to have that relationship. And without integrity, it's hard to build trust. So again, that you're seeing how this is foundational to the advising relationship. Professionalism, that kind of goes without saying. We need to be professional. We need to, conduct ourselves in a professional manner, have professional communications with students, and respect. Because again, without that respect, it's hard to build trust. And respecting the student, I always talk about how respect is a two-way street, that if we want students to respect us, so we have to respect them and what they bring to the advising relationship as well. I can say that by having that deep respect for all of my students when they come into my office, sometimes I learn more from them than they learn from me, I think, because we have students coming from all walks of life, all parts of the world. I know that your student body is very, very diverse, that you bring people from all over the world to your campus. I had the great pleasure of working with students from pretty much every continent where people live. And I learned so much about how, somebody was coming from a country where their government was paying for their education. And I had a student who said, boy, I'd really rather be an artist, but my country is paying me to come here to learn how to be an engineer. So, through the respect and the that I earned of this student, we were able to really craft an educational experience that he could become an engineer, but also explore his passion for art. And so he could get out the education what he really wanted, but also doing his duty to his country. And so that element of respect is also very, very important. The next piece.
Sean, before you leave that, can you go back to that screen just a second?
Absolutely. Yep.
so one of the things that Mohammed just put in the chat, which I think is really important, is how do you build this professional development? How do you build the discussions about these core values, which are so important? And I think that's where we really want to begin thinking about what is the type of professional development that you want your advisors to have to reach these core values, and begin to really look at these core values in relation to the learning students are achieving. And so what you may do in year one might be more of the caring, commitment, integrity building. As you move through, you then begin to really build that empowerment piece, be able to really focus on the inclusivity, be able to really to build those integrities as we move forward. So all of these relate to all 4 years, but I think students have different needs at different times. You know who your students are coming into your campus. You know what their needs are, whether you want them to be. So as we think about these core values, Mohammed, we begin to really think about what's that step-to-step routine that you want advisors to build into their own professional development with students. So if I'm sitting with a student and they have a question about their degree, but obviously there are other issues in their life that are really affecting how they're succeeding academically, that's when that caring piece comes in. That's when that integrity, so a student knows that if they speak to you about an issue, that you're going to hold that in confidence as you work with them, that respect that moves into that. It may be a very different conversation than if I'm talking to a student who's in their 4th year, getting ready to think about graduation, and you're helping them to do a professionalism with not only what you're working with, but then how do they connect with other advisors and other institutions as they move forward. So I think those pieces all relate to all 4 years, but there are going to be different core values that come out every time you work with a student within those. We have students that come in and they just feel like, I'm not really ever going to be successful. So we need to spend a lot of time talking to them about the empowerment piece, which means that we need, as advisors, to have opportunities to practice these. We need, as advisors, to have an opportunity to discuss these with our colleagues, to talk about these core values. How do they relate to what we do with the student every day? But how do they relate to what your advising program is going to look like as we go through that? So that roadmap that Mohammed talks about is really taking the time as an institution to take a step back and say, if we want our students to recognize these core values, where do we want them to play into being? How do we build a professional development that relates to that? And then as you talked about the KPIs, which we're going to talk about a little later in relation to students, but really deciding what is it we want them to know, do, and value. How do these core values play into that? And how do we work with those together? So it's recognizing that your professional development that you're building for advisors doesn't just focus on the institutional policies. They don't just focus on the courses students need to take or their degree plans. On many campuses, we spend so much time talking about the know. In other words, what are the facts we need to have? What's the data we need to have? What do we need to know as far as the registration process? We spend so much time focusing on that and never getting to these core values. We need to pull the two together as we work in those ways. So, Mohammed, I hope I answered your question somewhat there, but it's really looking at it as a whole and building those pieces as an institution. Sean and I could come in and tell you, here's what you do piece by piece, but we don't know your campus. We don't know your students. We don't know your institution. That's what we're wanting to give you the foundations for you to now do this, because if we did it, it would be a program that would fit what our institutions had been like. What we want to do is give you the foundations so you can begin to work in those ways. Go ahead, Sean. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. Thank you, Charlie, for that. And I think this is excellent because, Mohammed, you've given us a great, again, a segue to give you another piece of the pie, that's another tool in the toolkit to help get to exactly what you're talking about. And that's developing the competencies of the advisors themselves. So once you understand what your values are as an institution, and we understand the core values of advising, then you can start to get more deeply into what do advisors need to be able to do and to know at your campus. So we've divided the competencies into 3 different domains. The first is conceptual, the second is informational, and the third is relational. Now, I don't know what Charlie's experience has been like, but in my experience as an advisor, advisors and especially faculty, they get so advisors get so tied up in the informational, like what course counts for what requirement, and when do they have to do it by when, and does it show up on the degree audit properly, and did the student sign the right form on the right day, and all those sorts of things. Now those things are really, really, really important, obviously, because that information piece is sort of, as one of my mentors talked to me, accurate information is sort of the currency of academic advising. So that is critical. But a lot of times we forget about the conceptual piece and the relational piece. So the conceptual piece gets into things like, what is the mission of your institution? What is the history of your institution? How do we help students understand these things? What kind of theoretical underpinnings do we have to the ways we approach students? Now, my background is in philosophy, so my undergraduate is in philosophy, so I get really tied up in the conceptual piece, and that's where I really like to do my thinking and writing. And so we draw from, in advising, multiple fields. We draw from education. We draw from social psychology, educational psychology, student development theory. I use some economic theory in my advising. They call behavioral economics, nudge theory you may have heard of. I used to draw upon economic development theory, because the city where I lived had gone through deindustrialization. And a lot of the students came from a background where they saw their parents lose their jobs when the steel mills all went out of business in the 80s. And so their parents would go to college so you can get a better job. And so I had to talk to them about, what does it mean to be able to, how does the economy work? What is happening in our city, in our region, that's going to be important for you as you go down the road in 15, 20 years from now. So, getting that conceptual piece is also very, very important. And the relational, without those relationship skills, it's hard to communicate the information to the students back and forth. So as you get it deep into the relational competencies, you can see all the different pieces there that advisors can build to develop good relationships, positive relationships that are based on our values. And again, there's some things you can read more deeply about on our website.
Sean.
Yeah, for sure.
Sean, can I share my screen just a second?
Yeah, please do. Let me make you a co-host here, Charlie.
It's still telling me I can't.
It should work now.
Nope, there we go.
Cool.
Now I gotta find where it is. Okay. So I put in the chat just a moment ago the website for the competencies on our clearinghouse. Are you seeing Sean, are y'all seeing the screen for the clearinghouse?
Yes.
Okay, I'm glad y'all are, because now I can't get it up. Okay. But one of the things I wanted to show you here is that on the clearinghouse, you can find here, as we talk about the competencies, here are the conceptual pieces, here are the informational pieces, here are the relational pieces. So as we begin to think about those competencies, we really encourage you to go back to the website to look at these 3 areas and to begin to really focus on how we can pull those together and work with those. So I've given you that link. I encourage you to go look and see these areas, but it's a great place to begin and begin to look at your own advising to see where these competencies fit in. How do you begin to hold those professional development sessions around these, but even more so than just formalized professional development, how do you begin to talk to each other about these competencies, and which ones here do we use? And when you're talking to this student, what do you bring into your advising, and how do you use? I think one of the things that we hope you will learn through this series that we're doing is the conversations you have with each other, the conversations you have in small groups or with a department or with a college. These are so important to the advising relationship. And if we in this time of pandemic, where we're all working from different areas, the more we can have opportunities to come together either virtually through Zoom or in person and really begin having these discussions will be so important to advising as a whole. Okay, back to you, Sean.
Oh, thank you, Charlie. I'm really glad that you pulled that up. So, because that gives you an example of the amount of information that is on this website that the Nakata website. And one thing you can think about too, as you're, if you are looking at those competencies, is build out what I used to do is build out sort of a curriculum for the advisors. So what should an advisor know after their first year? What should they know after the second year? So they can get better and better at their job as time goes on. And then you can have even more seasoned advisors helping the maybe the newer advisors to develop their skills throughout all the range of those competencies. So yeah, thank you, Charlie. I really appreciate that you thought to bring that up. Let me bring my screen back up here. Hope you can see it. Does that look right, Charlie, to you?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So the next pillar we want to discuss, and this, you're not going to see this under the pillars area, and I think we are starting to move this more into being really a foundation of advising, because the Excellence in Academic Advising process was developed in partnership with the John Gardner Institute for Excellence in Higher Education, and Charlie was really the impetus for getting this started. And what he did, and I want to tell your story for you, Charlie, but he brought together some of the leading thinkers and writers and researchers in advising across the world to get together and develop and figure out what are the key elements for excellent advising at an institution. And so what they developed was really a 2-year process where institutions have to get very deep into each of these different, what we call pillars, conditions of excellence. And so under each of these conditions are a list of KPIs that an institution will kind of rate themselves on. But before they can even do that, it takes about a year of data gathering to understand the elements of institutional commitment, the elements of learning, the elements of the improved scholarship of advising, the organization of advising. And so after that whole year of data collection, then they get into the analysis of that data. And I actually was a fellow, so I worked with an institution in the state of Wisconsin to help shepherd them through this 2-year process, to help them really deeply look at their academic advising. We even get down to things like course data, student level data on courses. How are they doing? I call them the problem courses. What are your top courses that you're getting high failure rates or withdrawal rates in? And how does that getting situated within the way that you're talking with students their first year, their second year, their third year? So by getting deeply into this EAA process, you can really see the all of the elements of advising. It's very systemic in nature. And so I think that whenever you look at advising as a system, and this gives you basically all the elements of the system, you can start to really see what is going on and then come up with ways to improve your advising. Now, Charlie, I don't know if you want to tell them more about EAA.
I would, Sean, but I just got choked taking a drink of water.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We'll come back to this at the end when we talk about the student learning piece.
Yes. Okay.
I'll do that when we go there, because by
then
I might be able to talk again, Sean. I don't know.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I sure hope so. So yeah, the one thing to keep it, we'll kind of put a pin in for right now, is the institutional commitment and the learning pieces. We have found through our first cohorts that those are the two conditions that really drive the rest of the advising conditions.
I will say quickly that the EA process is a 3-year process. Institutions come in to work with this. There's a cost factor to it. But if you were interested, we're going to be building in the next cohort of institutions beginning this fall with a new cohort of institutions. So if you're interested in hearing more about the EAA, please let me know and I'll be glad to talk with you about it. Quite frankly, we'd love to have an international campus involved. And so we'd love to be a part of that. So just let me know if you have other questions and we can talk a different time about it.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
yeah,
Sean.
no, that's great. And yeah, really, that would be awesome to have an international canvas involved to see how this, because as you see, like Charlie was saying, we have to really start with the institution. And for any advisor to come in, or any consultant to come in and say, here, in 1 hour seminar or 2 hour seminar, I'm going to tell you exactly how to fix advising at your campus. That I'd approach that with a lot of caution, because it really does take a deep analysis and deep understanding of what you're trying to do and what is actually happening on your campus in order to build systemic change, systemic improvement, things that can last. And so this EAA really looks at the long term, and it is to me, from my professional experience, it was one of the most meaningful things I've ever done, was getting educated on this and really working with an institution to help them understand these conditions. I really think this is going forward the gold standard for advising, and it's all evidence based. This isn't just coming out of nowhere and making up, okay, this is what might be a good idea. This is really based on the data, and that is being drawn from an individual institution. And so this is a piece that is a lot of kind of an older concept that NACADA brought together. I think it was about in 2001, Charlie, wasn't it, when this was created? Something like that.
2006 and 7.
Oh, 6 and 7. Okay, well, I'm getting old. Things are starting to blur together for me. Thank you. You have such a great memory. So what we tried to define advising and write like a kind of a quick definition of it, and what they found is it really wasn't possible, because advising is a very complex process that really needs to be understood in a conceptual way. Now, I think since this was created, we have, I think, evolved a lot in advising, but I think this is still a good lens to begin to understand advising. And it's really looking at advising much like you look at any other educational process, so that it has a curriculum. So what is it the students, what is the body of knowledge you want the students to know? The pedagogy, how are you going to teach those students the knowledge? And the learning outcomes, what exactly are the things that you want students to know, do, or value? And how can you then assess those things? And so this is a nice lens to be able to see advising kind of big picture. I think the EAA gets kind of a lot more detailed than this does. But I think this still gives us a great lens for the overall view of advising. And again, you can read about this concept document. There's a long preamble, and it gets deep into each of these, the curricular piece, the pedagogy piece, and the learning outcomes piece. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about the learning outcomes in the coming slides. Is there anything you wanted to add on the concept?
I would just say that Sean is right, that there was a desire for us to come up with what people called an elevator pitch. How could I define advising in 5 words or less? And we really looked at the idea that, as someone said earlier, advising is part of the teaching and learning aspect of your campus. It's part of that academic learning on the campus. So if we see advising that way, then we can't just describe it in one word. We can't just describe it in one sentence. So we really have to think about it in terms of, what do we want students to know? How are we going to teach it? And then how are we going to measure it? Because one of the things someone brought up earlier, and I think it was I'm not sure who it was in the chat, but that what happens in year 1 may need a different type of pedagogy or different type of teaching than what might happen in year 4. So we've got to really think about how that teaching goes about, because in year 1, when it's primarily the factual pieces, that may take on much more of a traditional classroom teaching and lecturing. When we move forward and we start talking about building the connections and building the relationships, that may be much more of a collaborative conversation, which means we really need to talk about what is the pedagogy you're using, how you're putting those together. So it's a great way to really make that connection between advising and student learning and teaching and how they all connect. And when Sean says he's getting older, just understand I have shoes older than Sean, so I'm much older than he is within this. So go ahead, Sean.
Oh, well, all I can say is I hope my memory works half as well as yours does, Charlie. I wish it did now. I wish it worked half as well as it does right now. It's amazing. Well, we were. Sorry, I lost my pointer here. Okay, so I think we were going to do a group discussion on the pillars. Charlie, do you want to do this piece?
So what we want you to think about, and we're going to put you in some breakout rooms and then come back and have a conversation, is as we think about, and Sean, can you go back to that initial 3-piece slide? Go back about 3 or 4, keep going. There we go. So as we think, I'm so sorry, excuse me. As we think about these pillars, what is it that you need to connect with the learning pieces, the curriculum, the pedagogy? What about the core values? How do you bring them in, and those competencies? So we're going to put you in some breakout rooms, and we want to really have you spend some time talking about with each other which of these pedagogies, which of these foundations, pillars you can use at what time, how you might build it into the program, how you see it affecting the work you do with students. Then we're going to come back and have you tell us what you talked about in your small groups. So, Sean, I'm going to give it over to you because I know nothing about how to do these groups.
Yeah, no problem at all. I'm gonna put you into groups. There are going to be 7 groups, and whenever I hit all rooms, you'll get a little prompt and you can just click join the room, and you'll take you right over there. The other thing I wanted to mention is you might want to copy that link that Charlie put in the chat to the pillars. That one goes directly to the core competencies, but on the left-hand side, you'll see links to all the other pillars, so you can reference those during your breakout rooms if you would like. So I'm going to open the rooms now, and you should all be able to join.
Welcome back, everyone.
Thank you.
So Sean, you want to lead the discussion next on these?
Sure thing. Yeah, so we wanted to have a bit of a group discussion here, kind of like we did the last time we broke, to hear what your thoughts were. So would anybody like to share, either in the chat or vocally, what they learned or how they think they might be able to use these pillars to improve advising at your campus?
Yes, can I speak?
Yes, please.
Yeah, myself and my group, uh, we looked at the pillars and we compared those pillars of the state of the art academic advising mechanism that is available here at the university, and my colleague mentioned the trust between students and the advisors. He linked it to the R1, relational R1, articulate a personal philosophy of academic advising, and I link it to the second one, R2, create reports and build academic advising and relationships. This is very important. As my colleague put it, he said sometimes you have all the information that you are looking for, looking to give it to the student, I mean convey the messages to the students, but just to help them and guide them. But if there is no trust, students won't take it seriously. And this is one thing, I mean, related to this. And another thing is the R3, relational, communicate in an inclusive and respectful manner. This is actually what we have learned last time during the workshop on holistic advising. And it was actually a very important takeaway from that workshop, is to respect students and build a good rapport with them. So, and then we have another thing here at our university, a mechanism of advising where we focus mainly on students, students and the probation. And there is an issue here in this process where we advise students. We have a form that we need to fill up. It's called advising form, where we select together with the student courses, and then here the link will break. After we hand out the paper to the student, he goes on and he registers different courses than the ones that we agreed on. So this is, I mean, there is no mechanism to track those courses that you agreed upon with the students that are good for him or for her. This is what we have discussed. Thank you very much, Dr. Sean and Charlie.
Thank you so much. And
Welcome.
one of the things that you said at the very beginning, I think is really important. And that is, I think it's so important that you think about each advisor developing their own personal academic advising philosophy, because if we haven't written down what we believe about advising, how these pillars relate to that, who we are, what we want to achieve, then how do we know whether we're going to achieve that? The other piece is beginning to share those advising philosophies with each other. Understanding, for example, Hussein advising philosophy might be very different from Muhammad's. Doesn't mean one's better than the other or one's right or wrong. It means it's a different philosophy as we move forward and work with students. And so I really like that idea a lot. I would encourage you to do that if you have not already done that and then shared those. What a great idea. Sean, back to you.
I agree. That's excellent. That's something that that I always had my staff do, and I actually would help them to write it, and I would always tell them that it was a living document. This is something they should revisit every year, because as you grow as an advisor, as you grow as a professional, whether you're a faculty member or whether you're a primary role advisor, in other words, that's 100% of your duties is advising. It's important that we grow and that we kind of keep up with these philosophies as we learn more. And a great way to think about that too. And somebody mentioned this before about their advising experience as an undergrad. That seemed to be what was motivating that person. In this session we're doing today, is to kind of, that's a good way to start, is to kind of write down the advising experiences that you had as an undergraduate or even a graduate student, and what things do you think went well, what things do you think would be better, and you can incorporate those into your advising. Because I used to be a martial arts student, and I studied the same type of stuff that Bruce Lee did. It's called Jeet Kune Do. And what you did do in Jeet Kune Do is you learn kind of many aspects of lots of martial arts, and you develop your own personal style that fits for your body and for the way you move and the way, whatever. And I feel like that's a great way to think about advising too. We learn all these theories, and each of you have academic backgrounds. I'm sure there are lots and lots of PhDs in this room right now, and there are lots of, everybody in this room has their own story and their own experiences. And whenever you bring those into your advising, that makes you that makes it much more authentic experience as an advisor. And when you bring your full self and you bring your whole self to those advising experiences, I think that's what really helps to create those connections. So some of the things that kind of impacted me is when I grew up, my parents got divorced when I was a little kid, and we grew up without a lot of money. And I had to really, and I was a terrible student in high school, terrible. I don't even know how they let me into college, let alone I ended up getting a doctorate. But those things very much drove me. And I wanted to be able to be the person that I didn't have as a young person, as I was trying to navigate these things. And so I always made that an important part of the way I work, is I want to be the person that they need. Not the person that I want to, like you said, the person I want to be is the person they need. So I will do whatever they need for me to be successful. So I always wrote that into my advising. That was a thread throughout my advising philosophy. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Charlie.
No, but we had a couple of folks who raised their hands that wanted to speak, and I don't know how to do that. So you'll have to know where we go there, Sean.
Oh, just go ahead. So, Mamar.
I think Hussein first.
Yes. Oh, okay. Hussein, please.
I believe Dr. Mamar first, but that's fine if he lets me.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you. So we discussed in our group, it's kind of including everything in the framework. It's setting the tone with your student. So if you set a friendly tone and you build that trust, which is the word, trust is the most important part, they will be open to discuss some challenging part of their needs, such as financial, such as social challenge, such as so on. I mean, but if you don't set that tone or friendly tone, and they will be open so you can help them. The most important part for us is to help them to be the future leaders, the future participant in our society. And if you set that friendly, constructive, good tone and trust, then they will take that further. But if you set a negative tone, they will not trust you and they will not share, then you can't help them. And they will take that in the future career. They will set maybe negative environment, because what teach them, it will be going forward as well.
That is brilliant, Hussein. That really is a powerful statement that you just made. The tone that we set can help set the tone, that the way they deal with people down the road. That is, and that's the power of advising, I think. And this idea that every student gets to interact with an advisor. How can an advisor leverage that relationship or help or build that relationship in the way that you just mentioned? I think that is incredibly powerful. Thank you for that.
I think it also helps us to help students learn how to deal with the various faculty they may have, because every faculty comes at it differently. And so as we think about helping students to learn how to trust and helping them to know those pieces, it also helps us to deal with the student who says, I just can't learn from that faculty. Here are the reasons why, but it may be the only faculty teaching that course. So how do you help them work with those pieces? So really good point. Excellent point. Who else? Several other people had their hands up, Sean.
I think,
okay.
Mumar, can you please pronounce your name? I want to make sure I pronounce it properly.
Yes, Muammar, yes.
Muammar, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think following to the point that raised by Dr. Musa, where the student, they change their mind after they leave the advisor, I think this can be solved by automated the system. So if we have a system that the advisor need to click approve, for example, these courses, and the student also approve, and maybe the chair or the registration office, this can be solved. So a student will not be able to change by his mind. He need to come back to the advisor to select another courses if he don't like the first selection in the first week of the school when he visit the lectures, etc. So he can again visit the advisor and agree about something else, and then the advisor need to electronically approve that things. Maybe having a system will solve this issue. The other thing is the trust. Trust, I think we have here maybe different culture from Western countries, that girls, for example, they may not be able to tell private things that based on their family, based on their social life or whatever, to a male advisor. Maybe we need to think to have diversity between male and female in each department, where female maybe can advise the female students, male can advise the male students, etc. But I think we need at least, يعني احنا luckily department, our department, we have a lady there, which is يعني most girls they go to her and they tell their stories to her, and which is it help us a lot يعني. So for the group discussion, I think Dr. Sharafuddin had some ideas and we discussed them. Maybe he can present it on the behalf of the group. Thank you.
Say a couple of things about what you just said I think is so important, and that is that when you think about new processes or procedures like you were discussing in relation to a student wants to change, how do you make those policies or procedures or processes based upon what is the best experience for the student, what is the best experience for the quality advising program, and not just make it as a separate, we're just going to put this in because we think we should. We need to have some reason for putting those in. So your example of making a change in that really goes back to your foundation of what you believe in, your core values, your beliefs, and then developing policies that do that in a way. I think you're exactly right on your idea of different students react differently to different advisors. Believe it or not, we have the same issues in the Western part of the country where, part of the world, where many times students from different cultures or different genders will just react differently to a white male advisor very differently than an African-American female within that. And so while you don't want to particularly say, okay, all women will go to this one person and overload that person, there may be different aspects of what goes on within that. So maybe one advisor that's male just deals with the courses, but they have a female advisor that they work with for the relationship or the connection to campus. But it's really pulling those together. Really good points there. Excellent points. I'm sorry, back to Sean, to other people.
I think that those were the only hands that
I
were
think
raised.
someone else was going to speak on Bahab's group just a minute ago. I
No.
got interrupted him. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. Yeah, this is me, Sharafuddin, from the group. Same group from Amar was here. Actually, we were discussing, and then I would like to highlight one thing, that the combination of the courses, that to link the curriculum, the difficulty level of the courses, and mix and match for the students. This is very important because the advisor, from my point of view, that they should, he or she should be aware of the difficulty level of the course, not based on the perception of other students, but based on the content. So this will help the students to pick a right courses, especially those students who are on probation or they are at the verge of the dismissal from the program. So maybe from the department point of view, that we will find or develop 3 baskets: one easy courses, one difficult course, and one average courses. And then we will allow the students to pick 1 or 2 according to his or her GPA. So this will help the students to pick a right course in a right semester, so that they will not compromise on their GPA. So that was one of the points that we discussed in a group. Thank you.
That's really great. And you get to a really important point, and that's that the advisors can help the students make meaning across the curriculum. So when you take this very difficult course and this very difficult course, how do those things relate to each other? So depending on the discipline, there may be different ways that would work. And so I could say that in my, I'll mention in philosophy, what we all had to take symbolic logic. But nobody ever really would say, why do you have to take symbolic logic? And it would just, well, that's part of philosophy. Well, but what you have to understand is that in analytic philosophy, philosophers use symbolic logic to analyze arguments, to make sure that the arguments hold together and that the premises follow from the conclusions. So
Exactly.
and it's a simple thing like that. An advisor could tell a student, or statistics. Why do I have to take statistics as a psychology major? I hate math. Well, if you don't understand statistics, you can't understand. You have to understand stats to understand research methodology. And if you want to, but if you really want to learn psychology, you have to understand how those theories are developed. And research methodology is kind of the work of psychologists. So when students can start to understand the whys and how the things connect together, because stats and research methods courses are always the hardest parts for most psych majors. So if you can help them get the whys for that and say that the content you're learning in social psych or the content you're learning in abnormal, that information has all been built based on these statistics and research methodologies. So whenever students start to understand that why, sometimes that can help them have a little bit more motivation to succeed in those courses when they can connect meaningfully to the work that's happening in their courses. So that is a really important point. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Sabir,
Thank you.
I think Sabir had put his hand up.
Samuel.
Sabir, I'm sorry, excuse me.
Samuel. Okay, thank you. What we did was to look at this from the professional development perspective, perhaps because my colleague and I work in an institute where we do conduct professional development workshops. So in our view, it's very much germane that academic advisors take the issue of the framework, the component of the framework, has to be taken seriously. And as Charlie earlier, said, there's nothing wrong in conceding that I don't have the knowledge of this, and I would like to get more training concerning this and that. So we thought it's important to have the knowledge of the conceptual component. We also feel you need to have information. You need to know where to send people to for you to be able to send them to the right place. So if you are relatively new, in a contest, you yourself, you need some sort of orientation for you to be able to navigate through the system effectively. And we also thought, just like Hussein said, we thought relational is very, very important, being able to demonstrate, compassion, patience, to learners will actually make a huge, difference. So, but again, we understand that, while some people might be, sorry, Charlie, we understand that while some people might be, born, leaders, with certain, tenants, some people might need to get some sort of, training. So if we fall in the category of the individuals who might need additional training, there's nothing wrong in saying I need training on this and that. If indeed we want to be complete, academic, we need to be able to provide support in all ramification, to our students. So getting support or getting assistance or training should not be seen as a bad thing. So that is the, perspective that we took, perhaps because of our orientation as, trainers ourselves. So thank you so much. And I, quite agree with what colleagues have shared, as well as your perspectives as well. Thank you.
And I think you're exactly right. What you're really doing is developing what you want your advisors to know, and then providing them the professional development to be the best advisor they can be. And you're exactly right. So many campuses focus just on that informational. Everyone needs to know the information, but there's other pieces of these competencies that folks need to have. So I just really applaud you for what you're doing to develop these. This is a great program. Sean?
Well, thank you. I think it's we're going to move forward with the last few slides here to kind of tie these things together. Let me share my screen real quickly. Thank you for all these wonderful comments. This has been you've been spectacular. I can't find my share screen thing. Oh, there it is. Sorry. Excuse me 1 second. Okay, great. Here we go. So I think the next piece is this gear visual shows you kind of how this all fits together. Your values have to drive your mission, and then your mission drives your outcomes, but they all interact together. And so as you develop your mission and then build your outcomes, your learning outcomes, your outcomes then kind of also should feed back into your values. So these things should all work well together. And we're going to give you a couple of examples of good mission statements, because you need to have that mission so you understand, like Charlie said earlier, where are you going? What do you want to actually get done? And so I will hand it over to Charlie to talk about Wheaton College.
So one of the things as we think about the mission statement for a campus is it does several things. One, it tells you as advisors what that roadmap you want to achieve, what you as a campus want to ensure that advising does across the university. But at the same time, you also want to be able to communicate to students, to their families, to the administrators, to whoever you need to communicate to, what advising is, and to clearly define that. So this mission statement is very important. I think another piece to recognize is what your mission statement looks like may be very different than another university in your area, or it may be very different from a university in the Western country or whatever. It's really based upon your institution. So Wheaton College is a small liberal arts university in Massachusetts. It is very traditional based. Students have to have very high GPAs to get in, so it's a very liberal arts type of school. And so when they were working on their mission statement through EAA, they really wanted to talk about that connection of the classroom with the experience the students have, that enabling students to be successful, helping students to discover the broader range of classroom opportunities, and then working collaboratively with faculty and other offices. So they really wanted to define it in ways that said, this is what we want advising to look like. It may look differently in year 1, 2, 3, or 4, but overall, this is what we want it to be. Next slide. A different university, Frostburg State, is a small public land grant type of institution. And it really talks about the mission of the advising center, because they had one center they were dealing with, is to help students to identify, pursue their educational goals, information, responsibility, because this was where first year students came to be advised. So they were really building the mission statement for what first year students would have before they move forward. So as we think about defining advising, it's that mission statement that does that and begins to work with those pieces and bring those together. Next slide, Sean. So we're going to put you back into groups, but we're just going to give you like 10 minutes, maybe max, Sean, probably 8 minutes, maybe.
Yeah, we have 13 minutes left.
Let's do 8 minutes, Sean.
Okay.
Just to spend a few minutes talk about what do you want to communicate about advising across your campus. Do you have a mission statement that does that already? Does it go back and really delve into what advising really is? So Sean, let's put folks into groups and we'll come back and talk about that again when we come back.
Okay, the groups are open. Thank you.
So welcome back, everyone. We hope you had an opportunity in that session to talk a little bit about how you want to define advising on your campus. If you have a mission statement, it's a great time to go back and revisit that and be sure that it clearly defines advising for the university. If you don't have one, this is a great opportunity to begin to develop one. Keep in mind that this is going to define advising for students, really set the pieces as we move forward, and then think about how these competencies all fill into that. So Hussam, you had your hand up?
Yes. So,
Yes.
So we have discussed the mission statements. We haven't developed one, but we discussed what should we include in the mission statement. For instance, encouraging our students for success, clarify their career goal and their educational and career goal. Educational plan, maybe mention some about their educational plan is the tracking plan. Enhance their awareness about what educational options they have. Maybe they and evaluate the progress, like these kind of inclusion too about students with disabilities and all that kind of points we have discussed.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Those are great ideas to look at within that. Sean, we have some other people with hands up.
Yes. Musa,
please.
Please.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much to the colleagues and Dr. Charlie and Dr. Sean. Myself and my colleagues in the breakout room, we wrote mission statements. I wrote the first one says that it states that we need to assist students in identifying their potential and have them succeed both academically and professionally. Dr. Muhammad Abu Shouk, he came up with the second statement. University of Sharjah engages and empowers students to achieve academic success. Dr. Ahmed Farouk, helping students solving issues, preventing them from performing to their maximum. And Dr. Sumana, guide new students to the new academic world and lead them to achieve their goals and increase their chances of succeeding in their professional career. Thank you very much.
Awesome. I love all of those statements. I love that statement about helping students to solve their own problems, because we don't teach them that enough. They come wanting us to solve them all. And you really talk about that's a big piece of what you want to do. What a great way to define that for students. A wonderful way to do that. Next.
Mamar?
Yeah, thank you. I think the university has the mission statement. However, the awareness of the mission statement is the issue. I'm not sure if my colleague and I in the breakout room, we all agree, there is a lack of communication between faculty and the mission, maybe the overload of the faculty, also the awareness for the students, the training for the students about the importance of the advising sessions, or following up with the advisors maybe. Unfortunately, students, they do not visit their advisors unless they need a PIN code to register or something like that. The other thing we discussed in the group is the available time. Faculty may not be available to advise 50, 60, 70 students per semester with all the loads of teaching, research, and community service, etc. So one of the suggestions come from my colleagues in the breakout rooms is to why not let the TAs, the best advisor for the students are the students themselves. The senior student can advise the junior students which courses are difficult, which courses is good to take now, which courses to take later. So maybe the student clubs and the departments also can help advise the students. Maybe they can have some seminars, some competitions or whatever. And that's what we discussed in the room with Dr. Sharafuddin and Dr. Hassan, I believe, and other colleagues. Thank you very much.
Very good. I think you created an excellent 2 points. One is there may be a mission statement already. It's being sure everyone knows that it exists and understands how it relates to what they do. Wonderful. I think the next piece you talked about truly is how do we design our advisory programs so they best meet the student needs? And there's an opportunity there that simply because you've got everyone assigned to an advisor, maybe that's not the best way to do that. And how do we look at those pieces within it? I think we're about through with time. There was a couple of slides we want to do on learning outcomes, but you've got those slides. And I know George Steele, the next person that's going to be working with you, will be discussing those as well. Sean and I can't tell you how much we've enjoyed being with you this morning. We hope this has been helpful. We hope it's given you some really good ideas to think about as we go through that. And we'll turn it over to our colleague to close us out for the day.
Thank you so much, Charlie, and thank you, Sean, as well. It's been an enjoyable experience. I can tell, from the contributions of colleagues, we enjoyed learning with you. And hopefully, inshallah, we'll take some of the things we've discussed today to improve our practices here at the University of Sharjah. May I also thank my colleagues, all the respected colleagues, for sparing the time to join us today. It's been a pleasure, listening to everybody and learning, with them. We thank you all so much on behalf of the Director of the Institute of Leadership in Higher Education, Professor Maher Omar. I would like to thank everyone, for your participation and contributions. And I hope, Charlie and Sean, I hope you have a great day. And for colleagues here in Sharjah, I hope, you all have a very great, evening. Thank you so much. And we'll catch up again, during the next session. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Have a great evening.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, thank you, everyone. Thank you.
so
Bye.
much. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
So-
Thank you, everyone.